Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius, the official energy drink of pewterreport.com. It is a Tuesday edition of the show, our second of the week, and the Bucs 53-man roster has finally arrived. It is finalized by the Buccaneers. They're actually the first team to get down to their 53-man roster, which made it the shortest practice in terms of number of people at practice today, as the practice squad is still getting figured out. So we're going to talk about what we agree with and what we disagree with from the roster finalization, and also maybe discuss a little bit about what went on at the Bucs facility today. So a lot to get into. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Join with me, my fellow co-host, the face that runs the place at pewterreport.com, SR Scott Reynolds. Scott, welcome.
It's me.
And the Bucs are here. The Bucs have arrived with this 53-man roster.
Yes, and they did it in a short record time. Sometimes we're doing this show at 4:00, and they've not publicly announced their final roster cut. So this is a departure. Last night I was doing a story on the final 53 Monday night, not even Tuesday morning. So it was cool to see. Greg Allman from Fox Sports, yours truly, JC Allen, really kind of the people that were breaking some news in terms of who was not going to be on this team, roster cuts. And they whittled it down to 53. And so I think it's a good roster. It's a roster that they feel comfortable with. And more importantly, like John Spytek said on our Pewter Report podcast just last week, they're trying to find the right 53, not necessarily the best 53. And I know that may sound a little weird and crazy, but it's not about collecting talent. And I was on JP Peterson's show today, and I kind of had to throw out that line there. It's like, hey, Florida State probably had more talent than Georgia Tech, but it's not always about the most talented teams that win. You can have all the 5-star and 4-star players that you want, but they have to come together to win. And I saw it firsthand when little old Tulane rolled into Manhattan, Kansas, and beat Kansas State a couple years ago. And I'm like, holy smokes, how did this happen? Like, we're a Big 12 team. I mean, this is ridiculous. But later on, Tulane ended up being a top 10 team. They beat Caleb Williams and USC in the Cotton Bowl. And so it's about the team. And USC, they put a dozen players probably from that team into the draft, Matt. And Tulane probably put 4 in. So it's about finding the right fits, and we'll kind of get into some of these roster cuts. And I did do a Pewter Pulse video that's more of a condensed version, but you're here today, so we're going to give you the full hour to answer your questions and answer your super chats and talk about this. But if you're looking for that kind of compact reason why some of these roster decisions were made, I touch on a lot of them in a new Pewter Pulse that just dropped on Pewter Report TV, our YouTube channel.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting about this roster, and there are some surprises that we'll get into, but nothing that's like shocking, and I think season altering in terms of some of the moves that the Bucs had. And I think even the cooler storyline that we're seeing out of the Bucs getting done first is, one, almost their whole team is made up of players that were either drafted or signed by the Buccaneers as an undrafted free agent. And particularly the starters. I mean, you look at that offense, and I believe, with the exception of Baker Mayfield and Ben Bredeson, everyone else has been with the Bucs for either getting drafted again or signed as an undrafted free agent, which is almost incredible to see. I mean, you don't see that around the league, and on the defense, it's very high as well. So I just think it's so cool for the Bucs front office. I mean, let's face it, there was a time when maybe this was more nationally than, publicly.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing that the Bucs front office was known for was, Jameis Winston being a bust as the first overall pick. And
blowing draft picks, right?
And drafting Roberto Aguayo as early as they did.
Yeah.
And now it's the development of this team over and over, whether from Mike to, Vita Vea to, guys that they have now, Rashad White, attracting Tom Brady to come here, figuring it out with Baker Mayfield because of this group. And they go from one of the oldest teams last year to one of the youngest teams now. So what a story arc for the Bucs front office and Jason Light, and cool to see that so many starters are homegrown in Tampa.
Yeah. I've had conversations with people in the front office. They don't like us around draft time because we nail some Bucs best bets. And how do we do that? Well, we watch a lot of college film, right? We educate ourselves on the players. We go to the Senior Bowl. We watch the practices, right? And we go to the combine. We talk to the players. We interview. We try to find out who's met with the Buccaneers, et cetera. We spend a lot of off-season time ourselves on these players. But, Matt, you would agree, you're part of the process. It's much easier since Todd Bowles has been here with his defensive scheme from 2019 to present day, to sit there and say, Tyke Smith, he looks like a Todd Bowles defensive back, right? Like we knew Lewis Cine was a Todd Bowles defensive back. They would have drafted him over Logan Hall had he been there back in 2022. So if we can do it, and we're not privy to all of the pre-draft interview process, the character reports that they get from their scouts, the injury reports and all of that, we're the outside in. So if we can nail a couple of Bucs draft picks every year, you know that the people on the inside, the John Spiteks, the Mike Beals, the Byron Keepers, all of the area scouts, they know just from watching film, that's a Todd Bowles defensive back. That's a Todd Bowles linebacker. That's a Todd Bowles edge rusher, right? And they get enough information from the coaches. Like this is the type of receiver Liam Cohen's looking for. This is the type of running back that the Buccaneers want. And when you have that, and look at a team like Baltimore. The reason why Baltimore is always good is because they are one of the best teams at drafting. Yes. John Harbaugh put a program in place, and those scouts in the personnel department, they know what a Ravens offensive lineman looks like. They know what a Ravens defensive back looks like, and they draft accordingly. And that's why they hit on so many players, and it's all about continuity. In some point in time, there will be a day when the NFL wakes the hell up and says, what's going on in there in Tampa? What the hell is going on down with these drafts? And they pluck John Spitech, and they pluck Mike Beal, and they pluck Byron Kiefer, the people that are kind of responsible, along with Jason Light, who's not going anywhere. But those are the guys that could run other teams as general managers or as college scouting directors. And the NFL hasn't wisened up yet. They haven't come to really raid the Buccaneers and Jason Light's staff. There will come a day sooner rather than later when that happens. But until it happens, Matt, you can expect another great draft from the Buccaneers because of that continuity.
Yeah, they know what they want, and they stick to their guns. Because, again, like they believed when they wanted to draft Jameis Winston and things of that nature. While that one was wrong overall, meanwhile, like everyone else would have drafted Jameis Winston or Marcus Mariota. But I digress. They still believed in themselves and believed in their overall process. So, yes, it is easier for us to see certain defensive backs and say that's a Todd Bowles guy. Right. I would say offensively, I know you mentioned some positions. We know a Jason Light offensive lineman when
Cody
we
Mauch,
see one.
Graham Barton,
Cody Mauch,
Alex
Graham
Kappa.
Barton right now. Luke Gedeke, like over and over and over, which is so cool to see. And, we all know the NFL wants parity across the league. They don't want one team to be great for tons and tons of years. They don't want one team to be terrible for tons and tons of years. And it kind of evens out a la parity because those bad teams, the Carolina Panthers right now, get the first overall pick, and then they're able to build their team. However, the Bucs and the Ravens, who you just mentioned as well, they've been doing it while picking high up in the draft each year. Let's remember, like the Bucs since 2020 have been picking, in essentially the 20s and, 32nd when they won the Super Bowl. The Ravens have made deep playoff runs year in and year out. So being able to keep this continuity going forward with different moving parts year in and year out is not easy to do.
Right.
And what's crazy is now the Bucs are kind of in this spot now where they have some money going into next year.
Yeah.
They have guys locked up at least for like 2 seasons, which is like longer than they've had it for a lot of guys. And they're really in a good position. And I'm excited for this season because they're not flawless. There's nothing 100% about the Buccaneers.
Right.
But there's so many things to point to more for positives and how they'll succeed than for how this team may fail or fall apart this year.
No, I think that's well said. And the other thing I'll add is like you look at this, and you and I were out there at the practices. We saw the rookie minicamp. We saw the OTAs, and we saw Tyke Smith do his thing. We saw Jalen McMillan do his thing. And we kind of said even before camp started, it's crazy to think that this Buccaneer team that's coming off of 10 wins last year, 9 in the regular season, and they won in the playoffs. They got to the second round, that divisional playoffs, and they took the Lions into the fourth quarter. It was tied up. They did that, and it was a good team, a very good Buccaneer team. But it's not like they have holes, but 4 starters from this year's draft class onto a team that won 10 games last year, like that shouldn't happen. Typically, most teams say, gosh, if we can get 2 immediate starters out of any draft, no matter where you're picking, first or 32nd, like that's a good thing. 2 immediate quality starters, that's good. And then maybe the third rounder develops, and he starts the next year. Maybe you have a sleeper on day 3, a 5th rounder, and he starts, right? Like that's kind of best case scenario. Tampa Bay, on a very good football team, is going to have 4 starters from this year's draft class. Graham Barton starting at center. Outside linebacker Chris Braswell will be an eventual starter at some point this year, probably on the Yaya Diaby path around midseason, is what I would suspect. But then 2 surefire starters in the 3rd round. Jalen McMillan will be the starting wide receiver number 3. That's a starter in Liam Cohen's offense. Tyke Smith will be the starting nickelback. Bucky Irving, your 4th round pick, is a quasi starter. And so you're taking a team that was really good last year and adding 4 guys that level up your good team. And so that's why I've not put much stock in this whole Atlanta Falcons winning the NFC South thing. I'll believe it when I see it. It's got to happen on the field because, the Falcons got better. So did the Buccaneers, right? And so I think that last year was a step in the right direction for the Buccaneers. I think this year is a step in the right direction for the Buccaneers. I think 10 wins is probably the expectation, at least.
Yeah.
And I think this team should go further in the playoffs. I think the NFC South Championship should be the expectation, and we'll see what happens there. But when you talk about making the leap, Matt, to your point, I think the leap happens in 2025. That's when the salary cap opens up. Chris Godwin's really only the big name free agent that you have to really worry about paying a huge contract to. And Yaya Diaby will be in year 3. So will Kalijah Kancey. Rashad White will be in a contract year in year 4. Cade Otton will be in year 4. So all of these players that they're counting on to perform and be young players, they're going to be leveled up in terms of playing time and experience. And then you throw in that extra cap money where they can go out and get a premium pass rusher if they need one, or premium this guy or that. I think 2025, the Super Bowl window is open now, but I think it opens wider next year.
That's why last year was pretty much their rebuild year. And it was more of a reload, as Bruce Arians would say, because they still won the division and won one more game than they did the year before with Tom Brady and Todd Bowles in his first year as the head coach. So, once again, shout out to the Bucs building a team really in the right way, where they have all the pieces they want around them. And then, if they do want to go get to a premier player, whether it's a pass rusher or another position,
right?
They're doing it to fill out their team and not to be the savior and completely change the fortunes of their teams. There are a lot of other franchises out there in the NFL that think all their problems are solved because they brought in one big time free agent. But as we see across the league, sometimes a change of scenery is great for a player, but when it's a player that is just getting the bag, as they say, and comes to a new team, it's not always the right fit. It's not always the right chemistry, different personalities and things of that nature. So once again, I think the Bucs are in a good spot. And at the end of the day, they'll just draft well once again.
Exactly. Well, you're in the right spot for Bucs news, Bucs fans, because we had what we believed. These are the players that should have been on the roster in our 53 yesterday. And we did something a little crazy, something a little unexpected. Matt and I went with 23 offensive players and 27 defensive players. And usually it's 25, plus you get your 3 special teamers, the long snapper, the kicker, the punter, that make up the other 3 of the 53. Sometimes teams will skew a little bit and go 26, 24, but I can't recall a Buccaneer team that has been 23, 27, or 27, 23 as it pertains to offense and defense. But we actually, Matt, we didn't get all the players right. We're off by a handful, but we said 23 offensive players and 27 defensive players, and that's exactly what was hit on by Todd Bowles and Jason Light.
Yeah, it was. And I think, Bowles spoke about this as well. I think the biggest thing that really stood out was having 11 defensive backs, which kind of screwed over the wide receiver room
Yeah,
a little bit in that sense. But I think it stands out a lot more. One, because the kickoff is more like a defensive play, as we talked about on yesterday's show. So you want more defensive guys. But
right.
two, I think what is big is some of the guys defensively right now in that secondary where they do have more defensive backs is the fact that, Tyreek Thunderberg makes this team.
Yeah.
But he's injured right now, and we don't know exactly when he's going to come back. He did not participate today. Tavon Merriweather is still out. Josh Hayes was out of practice today as well.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you want to keep them, but you also want a little bit of insurance and assistance with filling out that defensive back room. So maybe you add on one more. And that's what Todd Bowles said. Like someone like Funderburg, they really liked and they enjoyed seeing. He even mentioned like going back to minicamp, how much he enjoyed Tyreek Funderburg. So that was a guy that they had on their radar for quite a while, where they felt he was going to make the team, but he just unfortunately got injured, at the wrong time. So how do you decide to keep those guys and not, not hold on to someone else? Here's what Bowles had to say. I wanted to find it. He said it's complicated, but if you have a skill set and you've shown something, for example, Funderburg, we saw him in the spring, summer, and early on when he came in. He's a good football player. You knew right away that he had a damn good chance of making this team. So you weigh those type of things, obviously, with having to cut someone else to keep an injured player like Funderburg on the team. So, yeah, I think defensive back probably was one of the biggest surprises in terms of the number that they kept with this group.
Yeah, and I think, too, when you look at Funderburg, for example, there's a little bit of gamesmanship that happens, a little bit of chess playing with the roster, right? Because, and Todd Bowles even said this, he said, you're more likely to re-sign your own guys that you cut and put on the practice squad because you've got time invested in them. They know your system. They've learned this system since May, since they were undrafted free agents, right? So with a player like Funderburg, they might end up cutting him, right, and putting him on the practice squad to maybe if he's going to be out for like a couple weeks, but they don't put him on IR, maybe it's like a week or two that he's not going to play in Washington, and they're going to need somebody, right? And I'm just saying, hypothetically speaking, what they can do is they can cut him, but they cut him after teams assemble their practice squads, and they just kind of say, hey, re-sign with us, and then once you get healthy, we'll put you back on the active roster, right? So a lot of those types of situations happen. And so don't be surprised if they do make a couple of roster moves based upon some of those injured guys you're talking about, because they need help with special teams. They got to have guys that can run down and cover kicks, etc. So this is the 53-man roster for now. It might change by a player or two prior to Washington based on injuries.
Yeah, it changes all the time. It changes, in October, November, and December too. So yeah, you can look at the roster right now, maybe be disappointed about this player getting cut or that player getting cut or that player making the team.
Yeah.
But it will change again. So, don't get your heart set on just this active roster right now. That they had to trim it down to this. It may change again, before the Bucs play their first game. So shout out, we got a super chat. Shout out to Cincy Kid, who I don't think we've seen since the NFL draft and the live draft show. Great to have you back, Cincy Kid. Thanks for the $5 super chat. Who says Bucs season starting Sunday makes me want to go woo, Ric Flair style. Thank you very much for the super chat. I just do want to clarify: the Bucs don't play this Sunday; they play the following Sunday. So it's 12 days from now until the Bucs play. But I appreciate the enthusiasm and excitement.
Yes.
And there is a full slate of football this week. It is college football
Amen to that.
on Saturday, and it's Labor Day weekend. So football is back, and that's worth being very, very excited about. So thank you very much, Cincy Kid, for the $5 super chat.
So this is a name worth keeping an eye on right here. If the Vikings cut Lewis Cine, as Nick Bowen reports, and we're doing this live podcast, I haven't checked it, but if that is the case, that is a player that Todd Bowles was very interested in. And so we talked about some of these movements, right, that we could see. Lewis Cine might be a player that you bring in, and maybe you put Christian Izzy on the practice squad, or Tavier Thomas is a core special teamer. I don't know that he would be the guy, but Kayvon Merriweather, Matt, he's a player that dealing with the knee injury. He may not be ready to go in week 1. So you cut him, put him on the practice squad, and then you give Lewis Seen a couple of weeks of practice and see how he does. Right. And if you can play teams initially and help you out, he was a first round caliber player. He was drafted number 32 overall by the Vikings, and the Buccaneers were going to draft him, if not for the Vikings trading up into the end of the first round. And that left them with Logan Hall, which, they're not upset about Logan Hall, but Lewis Seen was going to be the guy. So that's a player to kind of keep an eye on right there for Tampa Bay. And we'll see what happens. The good news is you're right, Matt. There is football this week, and it's not Buccaneer football just yet, but sooner rather than later, it's going to be here. And when it is, we want you to be aware of our new Pewter pregame show, September 8th. We're going to have these on game days at 9 o'clock in the morning. So whether the game's at 1 o'clock or 4:25 or even like a primetime game, you'll have an extended time frame to watch that. It's going to be about a 30-minute condensed pregame show. It won't necessarily have the inactives. You can follow us on X for those. We'll report those as soon as we know, but we'll have a good idea of who will be playing and what the key matchups are, etc. So check out Pewter pregame at September 8th at 9 a.m. And again, that's going to be on game day. So when there's a Monday game, we'll have that at Monday at 9 a.m. If there's a Thursday game, we'll have that Thursday at 9 a.m. So that's our Pewter pregame show. It's separate from Pewter Game Day this year. Pewter Game Day will be back. It starts September 8th at 4:25 p.m. That's where Matt and some of the Pewter reporters will be on, talking you through the game as you're watching it at home and giving you the Bucs insight. We know that there are some of these commentators that don't like the Buccaneers and don't talk favorable about them. That's great. Turn off the sound on the TV and listen to Matt Matera as he gives you insight from practice, insight from the locker room, because nobody knows the Buccaneers better than Pewter Report. So it's a great way to have us be the companion to your viewing of Buccaneer football. Pewter Game Day right here on Pewter Report TV, our YouTube channel.
Yeah, plus, live reactions. We'll answer fan comments and things as well. Super chats, of course, during it. It's a fun show. We'll talk some gambling as well if anyone has bets on the game too. So, yeah, all that fun stuff. Excited for another great year of the Pewter Game Day and the Pewter Report live stream. So, very excited for all of it to come through. And we got another super chat. So, let's keep these super chats rolling. Thank you to Les Evans for this $5 super chat, who says, I'm excited to see if the Bucs run game will be the real deal this year. Yeah, I'm with you, Les, for sure. It should be very exciting. It obviously looked great against Miami. We have to take it with a grain of salt that the Dolphins didn't really have any of their starters out there. And I think the biggest key for the Bucs, not the most surprising thing, of just how quickly can Graham Barton hold his own playing at the NFL level, because we know, like Washington, who's got some good defensive tackles, they're going to immediately attack Graham Barton right off the rip. And why wouldn't you? It's a rookie playing center, a lot of responsibility at that position. Why not attack him before you go up against Tristan Wirfs or anybody else? So I think that will be really one of the biggest tests for the Bucs early on in this season. But I do think it helps out as well that you got Liam Cohen, different looks, different motions, can run the same play out of several formations. That will help, alter whatever the defense wants to throw at the Bucs offense in the first place.
No, I think you're right. And I am excited as an old school guy watching football. 1,000-yard running back was really what you had to have back in the day if you wanted to be a good team. Grew up watching the Redskins. John Riggins was my early childhood hero. Then moved from Northern Virginia to Kansas City, where Christian Okoye, Barry Word, the Marty Schottenheimer had the ground and pound going out there in the Midwest. So I love a good running game. Don't get it twisted though. I love seeing Mike Evans do his thing and Chris Godwin and Baker Mayfield, etc. That's fun, but it's always good to be able to run the ball. And I think that Liam Cohen and Kevin Carberry, Brian Picucci, those two offensive line coaches, they're going to be the unsung heroes this year, I think, because this offensive line, while it's talented, a lot of these guys were here last year, but this new coaching staff is going to get the most out of them, especially in the running game for sure.
By the way, I want to get to something else that Todd Bowles said today. He was asked about if they're going to be looking at other people on the waiver wire. And by the way, Jason Light will be speaking tomorrow after practice. So obviously Jason Light will have his own thoughts on the roster and, moves that are coming next. But yeah, he was asked if he anticipates any more moves ahead of week 1. He goes, maybe there are a few guys we want to see what the rest of the waiver wire looks like, and we will weigh those positions against the ones we think we need. We will kind of go from there. I'm not going to say we're done, but I'm not going to say we're going to go out and just take anybody. So yeah, kind of vague, but obviously the Bucs are still open to adjusting to their team, however which best way that they can.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks to Redfish for this $1.99 super chat. Thank you very much. Says, what else could CJ Brewer have done to make the team?
I like CJ. I thought he did a really good job. The reason why this team is going with Ernest Brown rather than CJ Brewer is because Brown can do a little bit more things from a pass rush standpoint. He's stout against the run, but he can affect the quarterback a little bit more. As you see on this play here, this was a 4th down. It looked like it was going to be a scoop and score by Antonio Greer and a sack fumble for Ernest Brown in that preseason finale against the Dolphins. That was not the case, but it still counted. It was an incompletion on 4th down. So Ernest Brown, even though getting held here, obviously, this picture, did his job and affected the play. And I think, too, he's just a little bit quicker and can work some of these stunt games better with the outside linebackers. And I will say this is one thing that, and I'm not really giving away any trade secrets here, so Todd Bowles is not going to be necessarily mad at me for saying this. But, Matt, you and I, we've seen these training camp practices. And, again, this is something that Todd Bowles has been known to do. I think it's going to be done with even more regularity this year. The stunts, those TE, which is tackle end, or ET, end tackle. And what that means is when you have those stunts, it's where you have a crosser and then a looper, right? And so if it's a TE stunt, that means someone like Vita Vea is going to go and essentially attack the tackle rather than the guard in front of him. And that guard, what you want is you want that guard to naturally follow Vita Vea and go, oh, no, wait a minute. Hold on, I got to block this guy. And then you have the end, Marquise Watts, Jose Ramirez, Chris Braswell, JTS, you name them, loop around inside for a sack. And a guy like Marcus Watts, who's not the biggest guy in the world, but probably the fastest outside linebacker, is very good at doing that. He's got a lot of sacks in training camp up the middle on some of those looping plays. And if it's an ET stunt, it's the same thing. And you've seen Vita Vea come from the outside. Or Kalijah Cansey is going to make a killing on this as well, where you have the end crash down at the guard, kind of draws that tackle, draws his gaze that way, and then the defensive end loops around and comes free around the tackle to hopefully get a sack. So that's an area where Ernest Brown probably a little bit better, a little bit quicker than CJ Brewer, and I think that kind of goes into the equation too, Matt.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, and we heard John Spytek say it, and he was talking more about edge rushers, but, you're always looking, you're not going to let pass rushers leave the building. And obviously, Ernest Brown, we're not saying is the next Aaron Donald by any means, but if you could just do a little bit more, that'll help your case. And honestly, for CJ Brewer, he'll probably get called up for, a couple games, or if there's another injury, he'll be signed to the active roster.
Yeah.
So, obviously, you want to make the first cut out of training camp, but Brewer, I think we're going to see on game days a fair amount this season. So I wouldn't get too worked up about it. So that's saying you are. I'm just saying.
Right. That's the difference between the two. Just to answer your question there, Jay Morrow. And as Kathy Gillespie says, talking about Pewter Game Day, she even listens to Pewter Game Day while she's at the stadium. So she's listening to Matt Matera and our Pewter reporters talk about the game while she's at the stadium. So we really appreciate that. Kathy, just to bring up something that Brian mentioned here, because this is something Adam Slavon helped compile the graphics for Pewter Game Day. And he says, cool graphic, but that's a Buccaneer about to get murked by a commander, right? Can't bring a sword to a gunfight. You obviously have not seen Deadpool, because in Deadpool, Wade Wilson, who is Deadpool, he's able to slice the bullets in half with his sword. And we think that's exactly what the Buccaneers can do against the Commanders as well. Plus, can also throw the sword and stab the guy before he has a chance to fire. So play along. It's just a kind of a cool graphic. And yes, we understand sometimes the Buccaneer might be at what is perceived to be a disadvantage, but you have to imagine, use your imagination that he's going to get the job.
I have looked at the schedule, and I tried to do the win-loss record in my head if an actual Buccaneer went up against like an actual Falcon,
right?
Like a Buccaneer versus a Panther, I think is a heck of a heck of a fight.
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree. So let's talk about this. Oh, wait a minute! I just got a shipment at the door. I just literally saw my Celsius come, Matt. I'm watching out my window here in the office, and I just got a big case of Celsius, which I'm not sure if you guys know this out there, but Celsius is the official energy drink of Pewter Report.
Of course, we love Celsius and all the fantastic flavors that Celsius has. Some of their newest ones is the sparkling watermelon lemonade and the sparkling kiwi strawberry as well. And it almost feels like every single week they are coming out with new flavors of Celsius. So it's a great way to start your day. If you want to substitute for coffee, no sugar, and of course, gets you that boost that you may need to get everything going for you. So if you know where to find a Celsius energy drink, head on over to the Celsius store locator on their website. Punch in your address, and it'll tell you the closest location where you could pick one up. Could be a Walmart, a health and fitness store, a Publix, or it could be your bodega. And once you keep going to your bodega and you know you love Celsius and you want more, you can get more Celsius. Just go to Amazon, click on the subscribe and save, and you can have Celsius sent to your place of residence whenever you want. You're in charge. You're the captain, maybe captain of a pirate ship with the Buccaneers. And have it sent to your place of residence whenever you want. Just make sure you're drinking Celsius energy drinks, the official energy drink of PewterReport.com.
Yep. We are closing in on 15,300 YouTube subscribers here on Pewter Report TV. So I want to give a shout out to everybody who has subscribed. If you haven't yet, please do that. It's free. Hit the button and then you're a subscriber. It's that simple. Also, too, if you want to maybe do a little bit more to help Pewter Reports and show your support, we greatly appreciate that. We're well over 60 Pewter Report channel members now. It's a great way to show your support. You get to use some free loyalty badges and custom emojis. It's a fun thing to do in the chat, as well as the article comments, or I should say the video comments. 4 different membership levels you can check out, from $3.99 all the way to $24.99. You can find out more information about joining the Pewter Report TV channel membership crew by looking at the front page and hitting that join button. And it has all of the information of how to do that. You can cancel anytime, but why would you want to, right? It's a great way to support Pewter Report and get some cool free perks as well. And we want to take the time to recognize a couple of new members that we had join yesterday at the end of the show. So thank you, John Close, Bill Devers, and Sean McGinty, our new Pewter Report TV channel members. And of course, as always, every show we do, we thank our Pewter Report channel members, Guru, Scott Federico, and Parformance too. So thank you very much for that. Greatly appreciate your support. And today's topic is breaking down the 53-man roster. So without further ado, let's get into that, Matt. Let's take a look at where the Buccaneers decided to keep the players. We already talked about the fact that there's 23 players on offense. Let's take a look at those players first. I think the biggest change we had from yesterday's show was wide receiver and tight end, keeping 5 receivers and 4 tight ends rather than 6 receivers and 3 tight ends like we talked about yesterday.
Yeah, well, good for Cameron Johnson being viewed by the Buccaneers as the as the 5th wide receiver overall, because I think there's an argument to be made that Cody Thompson could be wide receiver 5 and Cameron Johnson could be wide receiver 6, but that's not how the Bucs viewed it. And so Cameron Johnson makes the active roster, while Cody Thompson, I would be shocked unless, again, I wouldn't be shocked if another team plucked him off of waivers, but I would be shocked if he didn't get taken off of waivers, but then the Bucs didn't add him to the practice squad. So expect Cody Thompson back in Tampa Bay unless he's on another active roster. The big thing for keeping 4 tight ends, Todd Bowles pretty much alluded to this today. that, Ko Kieft is a blocker and he can play fullback, and his flexibility, versatility, whatever you want to call it, kind of helped make the team for him from Ko Kieft's standpoint. So, yeah, I still would have gone with 6 wide receivers and maybe 3 tight ends. But again, I'm not in the front office. I would also say one of the other biggest surprises, I would say, would be Brandon Walton over Haggard. I think would raise some eyebrows a little bit. But again, overall, a lot of these moves I don't think is going to alter the trajectory of how many wins the Bucs will have this year.
Yeah, I'll touch on these right now briefly. I did go into these a little bit more in depth in the Pewter Pulse, which it just debuted at 4 o'clock on Pewter Report TV. Our Pewter Premier, Pewter Platinum, Pewter Pro members got an early look at that a couple hours ago. But the biggest thing I think with the 6 receivers versus the 5 receivers is this. Ko Kieft plays in special teams, and I know that's something Todd Bowles didn't mention. He talked about him, playing a little bit of fullback maybe, and they are going to play a little bit more 2 tight end sets this year, and that is a fact. I checked that out with Liam Cohen during training camp. I asked him, I said, how do you like your tight ends? Sean McVay ran 11 personnel, which is 3 receivers, 1 tight end, 1 running back. About 95% of the time, he only went double tights or triple tights. About 5% of the time, he's like, we're going to do a little bit more of that, but probably not as much as Dave Canales. Canales did it about 20% of the time. So somewhere in that 12%, I think you can see them use 2 tight ends. So there's a little bit of a need there for Ko Kieft. But remember, special teams is often the deciding factor for like the last 6 roster spots. So 53, 52, 51, 50, 49, 48. Those guys, it comes down to teams. Ko Kieft is the only offensive player on kickoff coverage. The rest are defense, and that's just how it is. And I think Todd Bowles even alluded to today, do you keep wide receiver 6, which in this case would be Cody Thompson, or do you keep outside linebacker 6, which is Marquise Watts? Then you look at the positional value, and then you're talking about what John Spytek said, which is you don't want to see good pass rushers get out of the building, right? And so Marquise Watts plays on all special teams. So I think really for the last roster spot, it came down to Marquise Watts versus Cody Thompson. And you could see Marquise Watts have more of an impact because he is on special teams. And then if he's up, then you could use him as a situational pass rusher. How often, though, are you going to use your 6th wide receiver, Matt? That's the thing, right? Are you going to take Mike Evans off the field for Cody Thompson? No. Godwin, no. McMillan, no. Trey Palmer, okay. Trey Palmer makes the team because he is the true vertical threat. He is the guy that will go deep and create a lot of that opening by dragging those safeties deep and allowing those intermediate and underneath routes to open up a little bit more. So he has some value there. And I know he doesn't catch the ball as consistently as Cody, but he has that one element. So if you are 4 or 5 or maybe 6 on the depth chart, you have to do something different that the guys at the top of the depth chart don't do or don't have in terms of a skill set. Cameron Johnson has got that suddenness, that ability to separate that Mike Evans and Chris Godwin don't have. It's an Antonio Brown-like ability to separate. It's a short area quickness. No one else in the receiving core has that. Trey Palmer has the deep speed, right? There was some value having Scotty Miller back when he was on this team for that reason alone. A lot of times it's clear outs, but you have to be able to have that. Cody Thompson, he was kind of a poor man's Jalen McMillan, a poor man's Chris Godwin, and they already have 2 of those guys on this team. And so that's why Thompson wasn't there. And I don't think he's going to get picked up. And the reason I say that is he's 28. He's been in a lot of practice squads around the league.
Yeah.
I'd be shocked if he gets picked up.
I appreciate this comment from Grace Point, who is a Pewter Report YouTube channel member, who says Cody Thompson is going to get picked up. I would have cut Trey Palmer. I don't want to belittle what Cody Thompson has done in training camp because I keep calling him consistent Cody Thompson. Right. I just think of, really to your point, Scott, about the special teams factors of it. Yes, Thompson's special teams is important, but Palmer is also a returner. The speed's not even close. Trey Palmer wins that all the time.
Right.
And while he hasn't caught as many passes, Palmer's still going to be way more useful in the offense than Cody Thompson necessarily is because he can go deep. because he's already had some moments on this team as a wide receiver and has some chemistry with Baker. So it kind of does come back to like, what can you do as a receiver? And Palmer has a little bit more of an expanded route tree necessarily than Cody Thompson does. And again, I don't want to speak negative about Cody Thompson because I do think he should be on this team, and he was great during all of training camp. But yeah, a lot of times in arguments, you're kind of just splitting hairs.
Yeah.
This time you have to split the hairs in terms to really find the difference.
Yep. Rich Suggs here with a good question. So sorry for the confusion, but can you explain the practice squad rules as far as teams robbing practice squad players? If selected, must they be put on their 53-man roster? And yes, that's exactly the case. So you don't see oftentimes teams will come in and steal players from other teams' practice squads. They can't unless they put them on the active roster. And as was the case last year with John Wolford, when I think it was the Rams who wanted him back. Yes. The Buccaneers, they had a great relationship with John Wolford, still do. And it's a situation where they're like, hey, John, we want you to stay here. If you're really considering leaving, we'll put you on our 53-man roster. And he said, yeah, I'd like the extra pay that comes with being on a roster. So no offense, Tampa, but I'm interested in what the Rams have to offer because I'm going to be on the active roster. There's a big jump in pay and that weekly paycheck between salary versus practice squad pay. And so the Buccaneers bit the bullet and they brought him up for the last couple of games of the season and had him on the 53. So you are correct, Rich. You cannot pilfer another team's practice squad player unless you put him on your active roster. And that means cutting somebody or having an available spot to do that. So you typically don't see a lot of practice squad guys get plucked for that reason.
Yeah, pretty much. Well said. I don't really have much more to add to it. And you see it a lot more with there's a difference between getting waived and cut, and it's really just like how long you've been in the league for.
Yeah.
A lot of it is 4 years and under, it's waived versus the other way around. Grace Point, again, YouTube channel member. Thank you with this comment. Scott and Matt, is CJ Brewer going to the practice squad?
That's a good question. And I think the thing is when you look at these players, they're being subjected to the waiver wire, right? So so other teams can pick them up. And so that's there's a little bit of play there too. It's like, does CJ Brewer want to come back to the practice squad? Yeah, but he wants to see if he can make a roster elsewhere because that means more money, more stability, et cetera. So it's not an automatic or a given. If he is not, pursued by another team, then yes, I think there is a chance he could come back here. I believe the Buccaneers do like him. He was a player that got a lot of playing time and they were pleased with this play. But I don't know that he is going to be back, right? That's where other teams come into play. During this time period, these guys essentially have the option of coming back to their teams and re-signing in the practice squad, or maybe there is an opportunity elsewhere for a player to go and actually get on the 53-man roster.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a little rare when you see it, but sometimes a player will sign to a practice squad of another team based on maybe it's closer to their hometown. Maybe it's, different area that they're a little more familiar with. That doesn't happen too much all the time, but could be a possibility. But yeah, if Brewer gets through waivers and doesn't sign to a team's roster, odds are he's going to be back in Tampa.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at the Bucs defensive depth chart. Now that we went through the offense, we can go through the defense now. Along the defensive line, they kept 6. Vita Vea, Kalijah Cansey, Greg Gaines, Logan Hall, Will Golston, and Ernest Brown. No surprises there, obviously, besides Brown and Brewer, what we talked about. Outside linebackers, I think all very deserving. Yaya Diaby, JTS, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, Anthony Nelson, Chris Braswell, Jose Ramirez, and Marquise Watts. 4 inside linebackers, Levante David, KJ Britt, Servassier Dennis, who was practicing today, and JJ Russell. I think really the only thing that you could question is the Bucs keeping 5 versus 4. But again, that's because they kept 11 defensive backs with corners, Jamel Dean and Zion McCollum, the starting corners, I should say. The starting safeties, Antoine Winfield Jr. and Jordan Whitehead.
Yeah.
Of course, Tyke Smith, Bryce Hall, Kayvon Merriweather, Josh Hayes, who's big with special teams, Tavier Thomas, Christian Izien, and Tyreek Funderburg. So injuries in the secondary, I think, played a little bit of a part in keeping 11 versus 10 in that situation. But overall, yeah, that's your defense. Scott, your thoughts?
I think the biggest thing is Keenan Isaac. That's the player that when you look at the PFF grade, it's why didn't they keep this tall cornerback? Well, first of all, he's an undrafted free agent. I'm not saying he's a bad player. He's not, but he did do enough to make this team. The biggest thing is tackling and toughness. Todd Bowles wants his cornerbacks to tackle. We remember Zion McCollum when he got out there and whiffed a couple of times playing against the Carolina Panthers during his rookie season. That's a no-no. You have to be a good tackler. Monty Kiffin wanted his cornerbacks to be good tacklers. Brian Kelly and Bronde Barber were some of the best tacklers on the team back in the day. So was Dwight Smith. So Hayes is a better special teams player and a better tackler and certainly one of the better gunners in the league. And keep in mind, this is cornerback 4 on the depth chart. 4. So you've got Jamel Dean, you've got Zion McCollum, you've got Bryce Hall. Those are the top 3 guys. You typically don't want to have to play your 4th corner. And I'm not saying that he's not going to develop into anything special on defense. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But he might be another Ryan Smith. Okay, well, Ryan Smith was a very good player in special teams for a while.
Yeah.
And for me, I don't have a problem with him over Keenan Isaac. Yes, PFF had him as one of the better cover corners in the preseason, but his run grade was not good. His run grade was pretty bad. So if you're a PFF true believer, there's that to consider as well. Tyreek Funderburk, too, also brings more positional flexibility. He can play slot. He can play on the outside. So you're getting a player there that is tougher, better tackler, and is also having more position flexibility. A guy like Josh Hayes can also, he started off as a nickel last year. He cross-trained there. Now he's mostly an outside corner, but Keenan Isaac is pigeonholed as an outside corner. And in the NFL, if you're a backup, it's what can you do? Can you play on teams? Can you cover kicks and punts? Can you return punts or kicks? Can you play more than one position? A guy like Tavier Thomas is a core special teamer. I know fans aren't exactly enamored with him because he hasn't had a great preseason. He's learning 3 positions here in Tampa. 3.
Yeah.
He's learning slot. He's learning free safety and strong safety. So his head's swimming right now a little bit. So give him a little bit of a break. But he's a core special teamer. So he's a player that can play multiple positions. Christian Izzian, same way. We know he can play slot. There's an upgrade now with Tyke Smith, but now he's backing up Antoine Winfield Jr. at free safety. Kayvon Merriweather can play either safety. It's all about position flexibility. And with Keenan Isaac, he was just kind of pigeonholed as that outside cornerback, and he wasn't really a factor on teams, and that ended up hurting him at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think the Bucs overall, they filled a lot of holes in that secondary in terms of what type of depth they got going on. Again, like Christian Izzian was a starter last year, and now he's a starter in a different spot, of course, but that's because they upgraded at the nickel, at the slot position, whichever one you want to call it, which puts Izzian more in his natural position as a safety, albeit a backup.
Yep.
And again, with Isaac, if it comes to the situation down the road this season where, Jamel Dean's out and let's just say Dean and McCollum are out and something happens with Bryce Hall where Bryce Hall can't play, well, the odds are if they need an outside corner, they'll just call up Keenan Isaac for that game and not put Josh Hayes in that situation.
Correct.
Where Josh Hayes can still focus on the corner. So
exactly.
It doesn't mean Keenan Isaac's time is done overall. Yeah. It's just, you want a guy that can play 4 spots or can play 1 spot? Well, when they need the guy that specializes in 1 spot, Keenan Isaac will get the call. So it doesn't really change much for what Tampa Bay wants to do defensively, because they can just kind of move some parts around. And if there's injuries, then, that's when you sign a guy. And if someone's on IR, that opens up a roster spot. So, yeah, it's all about maneuvering. We see it time and time again where a guy starts on the practice squad, then he's on the active roster for the rest of the season. Or they're on the practice squad for literally 2 days because they have to move someone else around, and then they sign him back to the active roster.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of moving parts, and you'll continue to see that throughout the year.
There's nothing wrong with being a practice squad player, because that can be your catapult, your stepping stone to get to an active roster. We saw that with J.J. Russell. We saw that with Jose Ramirez. It's kind of like in college football, right? When you're a walk-on, you can go from being a walk-on to the real deal. And I'll say this too. Speaking of walk-ons, it doesn't get any better than walk-ons on Tuesdays. That's right. They have all day happy hour on Tuesdays, including $5 Tito's. So make sure that you visit our friends at Walk-Ons. There's 3 locations. There's Wesley Chapel Lutz, which is across from the Outlet Mall. There's the Midtown Tampa location, which is closer to the stadium. And then there is a Lakeland location as well. So Walk-Ons has got tremendous food. You can see here, $6 fried pickles. That's just about enough to fill you up. $8 boneless wings and cheeseburger sliders, $7 boom boom shrimp and queso dip. You can also get the small waffle cheese fries for $6. $3 happy hour pours, $3.99 domestic pints, $4 house wine, $5.49 22 ounce. That's the big boy, the domestic draft. The great news about Walk-Ons is they have happy hour every day, Monday through Friday. Tomorrow, they've got it from 3 to 6 and then from 9 to close, and also on Thursday. So if you don't have a chance to go to Walk-Ons today to enjoy their happy hour menu, you have 2 opportunities to catch it tomorrow or Thursday. They also have happy hour Fridays. It's a great place to watch college football, NFL football, all of the live sporting events, TVs galore. Their food is tremendous. So make sure that you visit Walk-Ons for their happy hour. You're not going to be disappointed.
Yeah, big fan of Walk-Ons. There's one not far from me, and I have a lot of fantasy football drafts coming up. I have one on September, whatever that Tuesday is, September the 3rd, and then I have 2 on Wednesday, September the 4th. So I may have to load up on some Walk-Ons cater and get ready for all these fantasy football drafts. So shout out
for
to
sure. And I'll just say this too, just a quick little extended plug for that. It's the place to go for your fantasy football draft. So whether you do it at your house or your apartment, let them cater your fantasy football draft. They've got a great to-go menu, but also if you want to have it at the locations, some of them, like the one in Lutz, have got a private room. It's a great place to have the fantasy football draft, as well as get some great food and drinks. So make sure that Walk-Ons, as you know, is your fantasy football draft headquarters as well.
Yeah, so that's the Bucs active roster, at least for now. Again, there will be a lot of changes. And, we saw it years ago. Leonard Fournette was a late cut by the Jaguars, and the Bucs were able to sign him. I don't know if there's going to be a big name that the Bucs will be able to get this time around, but obviously we also have the practice squad to get finalized and see who gets on that. Obviously, we've spoken about players such as Sterling Shepard and Brewer, obviously, and Cody Thompson, likely people that will be on that practice squad. But until it finally comes out, we don't know yet if the Bucs will end up getting someone else from another team. So that's why that's why they get paid the big bucks.
Yeah, tomorrow we'll talk about the practice squad that gets developed tomorrow, as well as any late roster moves that this team makes as they try to find that right 53. And taking into consideration some of these injuries, the Bucs only practice today and tomorrow, and they have a couple days off before getting after it for next week against the Washington Commodes for real on September 8th. That's right, the Washington Commodes. I refuse to call them their real name. So that's just a thing, folks. So you're gonna hear it for a week, the Commodes. Having said that, though, one thing that is great about this group of Buccaneers is not just we talked about finding the right 53 in terms of the right guys, the right chemistry. This team is so well knit. They're tight knit. They get along so well together. And I think you even saw that too on the Bucs cruise last year.
We're on the Bucs cruise. Of course, we're playing pool volleyball.
Hey, we on the Bucs cruise, of course. Anytime I say Tampa, they will say Bay. Tampa! Hey! Tampa! Hey! Tampa! Hey!
We're on the Bucs cruise. Of course, I've got my Super Bowl 37 hardware. What do you think?
We're on the Bucs cruise, and of course we had a pirate night. Arr!
Arr!
That's right. There's been some big names announced for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers cruise, which set sail from Fort Lauderdale with stops in Key West and Bimini, Bahamas, March 7th through 10th of next year. The Pewter Report staff's going to be on it too, so why don't you join them? But that's not why you're on the cruise. You're on the cruise, see the Buccaneers. We get that. Mike Allstott, Brad Johnson, some new names on this year's Buccaneer cruise, Super Bowl legends from yesteryear, as well as some very familiar faces from this current roster. Yaya Diaby's coming back. Luke Gedicke's coming back. You've got Kalijah Cansey, who will be a first-time cruiser, along with Jordan Whitehead and Trey Palmer. There's going to be more players' names added, so make sure that you stay tuned to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers cruise. You can find out more on their website, tampabaybucscruise.com, or to reserve your cabin, that's what you need to do. Call 1-800-975-7112. You can also do that on tampabaybucscruise.com. Can't wait for that. That's going to be a fun time.
Yeah, going to be a grand old time. Looking forward to seeing everybody on that trip as well. So, yeah, we'll have plenty of time to talk about Bucs then. We'll have plenty of time to talk about the Bucs this week and next week as they get ready for week 1 of the regular season. So if you're not already doing so, please follow us on all of our social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram. We are at Pewter Report. Of course, our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment below. We will make sure we go and reply to it. And yeah, we got plenty of content coming up on pewterreport.com and our YouTube channel. So we appreciate everybody for watching the show, as always. That's going to do it for us this afternoon. So for Scott Reynolds, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks everybody for watching. And we'll see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.